a teacher who struggles to keep his distance from a young and beautiful student. Hello, friends. Today we're going to talk about the movie Miller's Girl. The story follows a girl named Cairo, whose parents live in another country. She lives alone in an isolated house and has a passion for writing. One day, while passing through the forest, she arrives at a class where she meets Jonathan Miller, a middle-aged teacher. Jonathan had once aspired to be a writer, but after failing to achieve success, became a teacher instead. When Cairo joins his class, Jonathan assigns her books to read, but she surprises him by revealing that she has already read them all. She also has a close friend named Winnie, who is in the same class. The two of them leave to grab a meal together. Jonathan later finds an adult book among Cairo's belongings. His friend Boris, who visits him for coffee, takes the book and starts reading it. Both Boris and Jonathan are shocked to realize that it is a book written by Jonathan himself. That night, Jonathan's wife, Beatrice, tries to get her attention, but she is distracted. When she asks about his day, he mentions that a student in his class was reading his book. Beatrice soon receives a call from a friend, and after the call, she and Jonathan drink together. However, when she gets another call, Jonathan grows frustrated. The next day, Jonathan shares his frustrations with Boris. While talking, they notice Cairo coming through the forest. Jonathan, still unsettled from the night before, watches her closely. He asks if she isn't afraid to walk through the jungle alone, to which Cairo confidently responds, "I am the scariest thing in those jungles." Her boldness makes Jonathan laugh. At school, Winnie drops her books on purpose, knowing Boris would notice. When Boris confronts her, asking what she wants, she teases him. Cairo watches the interaction and tells Winnie she's acting crazy. Later, Cairo invites Winnie to her house where they discuss Cairo's college application. She needs to write about her biggest achievement, but struggles to find a unique experience to talk about. Winnie jokingly suggests writing about an affair with her teacher, saying that such relationships are common nowadays. Cairo hesitates, pointing out that Jonathan is 20 years older than her, but Winnie insists that he's a good man and perfect for her first experience. From the next day, Cairo starts paying more attention to Jonathan. Noticing this, Jonathan asks her to meet him after class. Meanwhile, Jonathan invites Boris to dinner, and after Boris leaves, Jonathan playfully mimics one of his dance moves. Just then, Cairo arrives, and they both laugh about it. Jonathan is impressed by a passage Cairo wrote, and even memorizes it. Cairo notices this and is pleased. Jonathan then assigns her a task to write a short story in the style of her favorite author. If she does well, he promises her full marks on the midterm. Excited, Cairo agrees and tells him she has also read his book, even remembering many lines, word for word. Jonathan is flattered and invites her to discuss her assignment over the weekend. That night, Jonathan and Beatrice go out for dinner, where Winnie happens to be working as a waitress. Beatrice, already suspicious, asks Jonathan if Winnie is the student he mentioned earlier. Jonathan clarifies that it was Cairo. However, Beatrice is clearly jealous and starts insulting him, saying that he hasn't written anything for years and is just an ordinary teacher now. On the weekend, Cairo goes to the location Jonathan mentioned. He follows her and sits beside her as they listen to a poetry recital. While Jonathan focuses on the poem, Cairo watches him. Afterward, they step outside, and Cairo lights a cigarette, which Jonathan shares with her. The next day, Cairo shows up to school in a revealing outfit, catching Jonathan's attention. Boris notices and asks about it, but Cairo says nothing. When Boris leaves, Cairo starts a conversation with Jonathan, and they grow closer. Jonathan then receives a message from his wife about plans for the evening, but those plans later get canceled. Later, Jonathan accidentally takes Cairo's phone with him. Since his evening was now free, he decides to return it to her. When he arrives at her house, it starts raining. Cairo steps out in a thin dress, and as they stand close, they kiss. Afterward, Jonathan returns home, feeling conflicted. That night, Cairo emails him a story she wrote. When Jonathan's wife complains that she can't work with him around, he leaves for his cabin, where he prints out Cairo's story. As he reads, he realizes it is an intimate story about a teacher and a student, clearly inspired by their own interactions. He gets overwhelmed, but the next day, he distances himself from Cairo. She notices the change and confronts him, but Jonathan harshly criticizes her story, calling it flawed. Cairo insists that the story is about them, but Jonathan denies it, saying they are nothing more than teacher and student. Heartbroken, Cairo refuses to rewrite her story and accuses Jonathan of being too afraid to write what she had written. She challenges him, daring him to fail her. Angry and humiliated, Cairo starts drinking with Winnie. Meanwhile, Jonathan is visibly stressed. When he tells his wife about Cairo's story, she gets excited, but before they can get intimate, Boris interrupts, frustrating Jonathan even more. Cairo, now furious at Jonathan, devises a plan. She and Winnie take provocative photos together and send them to Boris. Shocked, Boris immediately leaves Jonathan's house. At the same time, Jonathan's wife receives a call from the school. The entire school has learned about Jonathan's involvement with Cairo. Stunned, she demands to know if he did anything inappropriate. Jonathan denies it, but she doesn't believe him. The next day, Cairo is called to the vice principal's office along with Jonathan. The vice principal questions them, and Cairo openly admits to spending time with Jonathan, smoking together, and meeting outside school. When it's Jonathan's turn to speak, he hesitates, which makes the vice principal suspicious. As a result, Jonathan is suspended. Outside the office, Boris confronts Jonathan, telling him that he should have known his limits. Now, because he crossed them, he's paying the price. When Jonathan returns home and tells his wife about his suspension, she questions him again, asking if he had feelings for Cairo. Jonathan remains silent. This leads to a heated argument where they accuse each other of their failures. Eventually, Beatrice decides to divorce him. Meanwhile, Winnie confronts Cairo, saying she went too far and caused Jonathan to lose his job. But Cairo is indifferent. She feels that Jonathan underestimated her, and now he will realize what she's truly capable of. She considers this her greatest achievement. In the end, Cairo notes that Jonathan has lost his job, his wife, and his reputation. She wonders if he'll ever be able to write again. And with that, the movie ends.